Good morning, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Poole with 55 Plus, the director at Langston Brown, and today we're joined by Jennifer Droblyen, who is in the arts unit, and she is going to do a painting demonstration. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Turning it over to you, Jennifer.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. Good morning, everybody. You can kind of see me over here. Great to see everybody today. I hope everybody had a great holiday weekend. I am going to do this wonderful little photo of a penguin today. And of course, I'm in my office, so I'm in a weird little setup. I'm kind of like crunched in this little corner. So if I tip anything over, it's great we're recording this, right? All right, so just to kind of get you started with what the materials are for today, we're using acrylic. I'm actually, because I'm working on a larger panel, you don't have to worry about having larger brushes, but for me, I need some good coverage brushes. So I just have these, it's a 2-inch brush and 1.5-inch brush here. And I've got some sponges. We're gonna be doing a lot of sponge work today. We've got some water and an array of brushes. I'm going to use some flat brushes today. So these are, like I said, these are a little bit larger just because I'm working on a bigger canvas, but just an array of flat brushes. And these are synthetic hair. They're not regular, like, creature hair. Because we're using acrylic today and watercolor brushes are better for that. And then I've got another little filbert brush. Okay, and paint. So the products that we use in our studios is the Dick Blick quality, and I think that's reversed. I don't know if you guys see it straight away, but mine is reversed here. So Blick acrylic. We use the economy in our studio work, but you can also, as you're getting more and more adept at painting, you might want to start upgrading your materials too. So there is a professional quality paint. Whenever I talk about acrylic paint, I always tell people to get the mixing set of whatever brand you use. Especially in the limited palettes that we use, the fact that we're using just the 3 primaries and the 2 values to create our paintings. It's better to buy from one brand because their mixing set is always going to work more. It's going to work better together. These colors are going to work together better. And they use the same compounds to suspend the pigment. So they work nicely together without any breakage or any kind of craziness. So I have the 3 primaries. So I've got a ultramarine blue, and as part of the mixing set, I also have a phthalo blue. They do 2 very different things. So the phthalo blue is more of a cool blue, and then the ultramarine blue is kind of like it's a lighter, more sunshiny kind of blue. Then I've got chrome yellow and magenta, which is part of their mixing set. So hopefully I can show you my palette without tipping it over too bad. But I've got the yellow and the orange, the yellow and the red down at the bottom, and I've got white here, and I've got my my 2 blues and my black. Okay. So
Jen,
looking at
if I don't have a sponge for some reason, is there something that would sort of replicate what a sponge does?
do you have any kind of like a scrubber? Or
yes, I have a scrubber.
Maybe a scrubber would work.
Okay.
If you have paper towels and crunch them up, that should work.
Okay.
If
That's
you,
good.
I'm trying to think of what else could work. But really a scrubber, like a scrubber would work. Sometimes like, the steel wool would work, but you're gonna mess your fingers up with the steel wool. So I don't want you to hurt yourself.
No, I'll use the scrubber.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So looking at our picture, let me just set this palette down for a second. Let's just look at this picture. So this picture, what's great is when you see it from far away, it makes a lot of sense, right? But I actually did this on purpose. I gave you a picture that is high. It went through an editing software. And what I did was I pushed the contrast so that you could see the blacks a little more easily and the whites a little bit easily so that you can create your texture. And so there's a little bit of a high intensity kind of a, I push the clarity, I push the contrast. And that's just a trick that you can employ when you're taking a photo that you want to use for your source, to send it through an editing program and tweak the things that you normally employ to make your pictures pop. So if it's color, then increase the saturation before you print it. If it's you like high contrast, then push the contrast before you print it. It just helps you see a little bit easier, especially since it's a photograph that was taken with one eye instead of two, right? So let me put this back up. Oh, let me just show you how we're going to approach this. So we're going to what I call season the canvas. Even though this is like white, what we need to do is we need to really look at what the ground color is. And the ground color is really black and brown and green. So with that, we're going to have to do like a seasoning of our canvas with a dark tone first. And then we're going to kind of sponge in some of these areas. And then we're going to do our penguin last. Okay. But see, there's a lot of color in this penguin that you can kind of see in the rocks and also, sort of in his surroundings. So we're picking up a lot of little blue flecks that are in his feathers. That penguin actually looks really blue. So that's one of the reasons why I'm going to play with the two blues today. Let me just put this guy back. Make sure he's at a good height. Okay. Oh. There we go. All right, so that's our plan. So hopefully by the time, now that I've given you my whole 2 cents, you've got your palette and your palette's all ready. And what I'm gonna do first is I'm going to mix sort of a really nice dark brown. So with my dark browns, the way to do that is you're gonna actually take from the primaries and you take them all, mix them together, and you should have a really nice brown. So I'm taking this is gonna be my phthalo blue. I wanna take some red. Take a little bit of yellow. Until I get a nice dark, this looks like a nice dark color. It's a little hard to see. I have a nice warm light on our canvas today. And what I want to do is I just kind of want to season it, right? So I want to cover it all. Oh, that's a little more blue than I expected, but that's okay. And you're not really getting this. I mean, you're just right now, you're just kind of slapping it on because this is not going to matter. This is just your first layer. But what you want to do with acrylic paint is you want to add a bunch of layers. Layers on top of layers. Again, I should have mixed a big batch of this, but just coat your whole canvas. Now, one of the reasons why I call it seasoning, I season my canvas for 2 reasons. One, we won't have to go back in and put all the blacks in, right? Or all the darker colors, because all of that is going to be on the surface. That's one reason. The other reason why I like to cover my whole canvas is a white canvas is just really intimidating. And so it's nice to have the whole thing covered. It's almost like having the whole thing, you know, you got a good start on getting it finished. And so once you actually put a layer down, you're almost half done. And the other reason why we're putting a nice dark layer down first is because we're going to have some areas dry and some areas are going to remain wet for this because we're going to work kind of quickly. And there's going to be a timing situation with this. Again, I'm kind of mixing as I go, so I've got some colors that are kind of a little bit different, but that's okay. As long as it's dark, it doesn't matter. And I'm kind of going in a horizontal way here, just because, you know, our landscape kind of leans horizontally. So if we do have some stuff showing through, it's going to show in the right direction. Reflecting, it is reflecting. I have to, if I turn this light off, it might be a little better, huh? Let me know if that helps, because I really don't want to sheen. That might work better. I think that's going to work better, so you can see a little better. Okay. So cover the whole canvas. And then what I'm going to do is kind of just, you know, smooth out and kind of lift up some of these different things. So I'm going to take a wet sponge, squeeze it out, and kind of lift up some of this. Lift up some of what we did here. Just to kind of further give texture to this coat, this base coat. And all I'm doing is I'm just kind of burying my touch with the sponge. And that's going to dry nice. It's going to dry with a nice little texture there. And you can also kind of draw in a little bit now that it's wet. You can kind of pull some stuff up, kind of where your penguin's going to rest. So we're varying we're twisting our sponge as we go. And we're kind of just drawing in what the composition looks like here. I know that like the penguin kind of sits this on the rule of thirds. So if we were to fold this paper into thirds, let me just do that physically so you can see. So you can kind of see where, well, there's the angle. There's the first fold right there, right down the line of the penguin. And then you have another fold here. If I can get you to see that in the light. Yeah, there you go there. And then you can even do the rule of thirds. If your paper was completely filled, you can do the same thing. You can fold it in thirds this way too. But because we've got some extra room here, I'm just going to not fold it. But we know that if we were to, a penguin falls right into that middle third. Okay. So keeping that in mind, we can work on our composition as we're sponging this in. Higher. All right, so we're going to continue on, and we're just going to, because we've got sort of a wet canvas and it's drying very quickly, so we kind of have to use our timing. And if you need to get your canvas a little bit wet or your sponge a little bit wet, that's okay too. But just kind of like carve in as you see some of the light spots. And my little penguin here is on my third. So this guy, I'm just going to kind of sketch him in a little bit, not too much, but just, and he's in like the shape of a, I mean, what? He looks like a potato, right? But he's essentially a circle here and a circle here. And then we're going to texture all of this up top too. So you're doing a lot of the work for yourself right now, just by giving yourself some texture that only you can see right now, but when it's finished, it's really going to pop. We'll be able to see some depth in the grass and what's going on there. So it's a third. This is a third right here. And it's at the first third, which is right there. So we actually do a little bit farther up. So I'm just color. Now I'm doing this just with this sponge. I'm just kind of drawing it in. And I know that this is kind of light as we get into the front here. So we're just kind of pushing this sponge around. And you can use a different sponge too. And if you don't, I think I mentioned earlier that if you don't have a sponge, you could take a crumpled up piece of wet paper towel. Crunch it up and then do the same thing. So try to find like the spots that are light. So right now you're just kind of like putting in your, without even doing anything, right? Just kind of pushing paint around, getting your surface together. So for me, I've got this area here. Comes up. And like your lighter areas, you can kind of lift up some of this color, just kind of give you some guidelines as to where everything is. This guy's head's a little bigger. And this may seem like a futile exercise, but the thing is that what you're doing right now is you're getting a feel for your composition. You're getting a feel for your scale of what's on the surface. And, you know, you're kind of just having fun right now. You're just kind of pushing paint around and, you know, making things darker and lighter, because this is all going to come in handy when you start to put in your other colors. Now, another thing we did, which is great, is we put in some midtones just by pulling some stuff up. I'm just gonna go in with a little bit of wet. It gets lighter up here, so. So it may not seem like a lot, but we've done a lot. Again, I'm just kind of bobbing things in. All right. Now there's some areas we can put back in as dark. And we'll do that with a sponge as well, or a wet paper towel. So for here, I'm going to start to strategically look for, and I'm just going to actually just use black, okay? Because I want to be able to show. And what I want to do is I want to take my sponge, and I'm trying to get this kind of texture. So you want to blot a little bit. And we're going to do some of these really dark areas here. And so we can forget about them when we cover them a little later. But you don't want too much on your sponge because you want to show that texture. So just make sure you blot it first before you lay it in. And what we're going to do is I'm going to start with like the darker part of that. Testing it out on your canvas is always a good idea first. And there's a little bit of dark underneath those grasses there. And then we've got some darks here that are coming down. Just in the hole of the penguin, where the penguin hole is. Yeah, we've got some nice high contrast in these grasses up here, so putting them up there is not bad. There's a little bit of dark there. There's a little bit of dark there in the grasses. And another thing we've got going on is some dark here. So make sure you vary your sponge work. Make sure you're blotting it off. Dark down there too. So you're getting all that dark in, so then when you start to put the light stuff in, it's going to already be there. And you won't have to worry about putting it in. Another reason why we're putting the darks underneath is that putting them on top on the surface, when you're looking at it on the surface, if you imagine this in real life, right? The shadows are black and the things that are light are on top. So you want to reflect that on the surface of your painting too. So the dark black is going to be at the base of your canvas. And then all of the lighter color is going to be built on top of this. So right now you're really just building up your darker colors down below. All right, so now that's done. We're going to start to let things dry a little bit. So now we can start to work on some of the main subjects, which is these two rocks here and the penguin. And as we work on this, because this part here is a little bit, right now, this is the driest of all of the canvas, right? So it's good for us to, you can touch it and make sure it's dry. But I first want to kind of, you know, I kind of want to get this guy accurate. So you could take a pencil or you can take a piece of charcoal. But because I don't have that, I'm going to use a paintbrush. Just kind of draw in this guy because I want to make sure I get his proportions right. Because when it comes to animals or portraits of people, you know, if you get the proportions a little off, just a little off, it can look kind of weird. So I'm going to show you this in white, and then because it's easier to see. So I just want to make sure too that I'm going in my thirds, right? So, and my penguin is like smack dab in the middle. And then I've got my third here and my third here. So he's about the right size. And I just kind of want to pencil him in if you can, you know, if you want to pencil him in, or you can take, and what I'm doing is I'm just kind of drawing him with my paintbrush. Just doing the general shapes at first. This probably comes out like that. And he's got his stuff that's going on in the front. He's got a little wing that's coming down here. And because we've got this direct line, we've got a nice line of symmetry there where his beak is. Actually got a fatter head. His head is kind of cocked at an angle. So we know that like his, just a little bit away. And again, like you can do this with a charcoal. I'm just doing it with a paintbrush so that you can see. It's like a triangle there. And then his. So, and then he's got his, all of his stuff is right here. So I'm just gonna kind of draw that in first and see how that looks. Not doing too much right now other than just kind of placement. Just working with placement right now. Nice to find. We gotta see if we like that. It doesn't look terrible, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and keep him. He's got a little bit more of a line on this side. Comes out just a little bit more. It kind of comes out a little bit more too. It's a little more accurate, I think. Okay. So we've got some of these numbers in. And as you can see, as this is getting a little lighter, you can kind of see a little bit more. We'll turn on this light again so you can kind of see. a different, oh, that's not gonna help, right? Because it's, all you see is shine. This light was a terrible idea. Okay. But you have a good sense of where everything is, right? And if you, I'm gonna just kind of see if I can adjust this so you can kind of see a little bit better the whole. That's a little better, so you can kind of see the whole thing. All right, cool. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start to put in, now that this is a little bit dry, and these grasses are hopefully a little bit dry, just a lot. We're going to start to put in some of these midtones. All right, so look how messy my palette is from doing all that brown. I'm going to reload up because I'm going to need these colors still. I'm going to reload my yellow and my blue. I think phthalo is a good color to work with today. If you don't have it, that's fine. But it just, because it's such a blue, he's got such blue feathers, you know, according to the light, right? It may not look, I mean, when you think of a penguin, you're like, of course, the penguin is black and white. But in this light, he actually comes across as blue.
And I have a question about the yellow. Is it yellow oxide or cad yellow? Which yellow?
So I'm using what's called chrome yellow, which is kind of like a cad yellow medium.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, cadmium yellow is a pretty good mixing yellow. You just have to buy the cadmium-free cadmium because they're finding that you can't be exposed to too much cadmium or else, you know, it's one of those toxic materials. So try to find a cadmium-free cadmium. Okay, I'm going to go back in with my sponge. And this time I'm again going to come through with another lighter layer of color. So I'm going to start up here where these browns are and then get increasingly lighter. So I'm going to again take a sponge that is kind of, you know, this is just a natural sea sponge, but you could take a paper towel or, like I said, a scrubber. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix, I'm actually going to mix like a dark, I'm going to mix this dark brown, and then I'm going to get a little bit lighter as I go. So I'm going to mix red, yellow, oops, red, yellow, a little bit of phthalo blue. Until I kind of get the color I want. And that's kind of matching right there, that part of the of that area right there. So I'm just going to go ahead and dab that in. And there's some up here too. And see, by putting that red on top of that original like coat that we have there, it's starting to pop through as like a darker brown. And then, as like I said, as I go, I want to do a little bit more sparing. And then we're going to get lighter as we go across. So right now I'm just kind of putting in where I see that dark brown. So right next to his head. There's some down here. There's some next to his body. Some down here. Okay, and then I'm going to add a little bit extra light. So I'm going to start to add a little yellow. And a little bit of white to lighten it up a little bit. And have a color that I like. So that's good, because that's going to be sort of what we have here. So I'm just going to, again, blot to make sure you're getting the texture you want. And then just gently touch where these things are. Remember to vary your blotting. And again, this is supposed to be fun, so have fun blotting. So blot twist, I'd call that a blot twist. Blot and then twist, blot and twist. Good thing we're recording because that could have been a disaster. I'm always expecting when I do these demonstrations where we're recording now, it's like, of course, things are going to happen. Okay, and then we're going to add a little bit of that brown that's coming in through here and up top. So again, it doesn't really look like much, but we're getting a lot of work done. Okay, and now I'm going to add a little bit more of the white. Let's see what I get. If I add a little bit more white. And now we're really going to be strategic about how we lay our color. You don't want to overwhelm and take over the colors that are underneath it. So be really careful on how you sponge. You want to make sure you blot a lot. Okay, blot a lot. Because you don't want to cover up the good work you did underneath. All those black, because you got to maintain all of that black that's under there too. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of, as I'm blotting, I'm kind of dragging too. Because we are still trying to show that it is horizontal. The scene is horizontal. And we kind of want to reflect that there's, you know, there's a lot of stuff happening back there in terms of all these rocks. And we're going to paint in these individual rocks, so don't worry too much about what you got. But try to make that as even as you can. So without diminishing the colors underneath. And I'm going to have some of that come in on here. Across. And make sure again that you're reloading your color. I just mixed a color that I think would look really nice up here. So I'm going to just kind of put that in real quick. Always judge what's on your canvas. And say, okay, do I need to warm this up a little bit? Get some stuff coming on here. gonna add a little bit of blue, a little bit of blue to that. Because we've got some stuff happening here. Yeah, a little more blue. Yeah, kind of give that a little. Okay. So we're just building this up. And because we got a lot of midtones in there, then we can actually start with putting in like some pure white. So we can really start to lighten this up and get some contrast. So I'm gonna clean my brush or my sponge off really good. And now I'm just gonna sort of place in some of these really, let me make sure I have a good blot down. Where these really high contrast areas are. So I'm kind of like blotting and dragging again. Again, not really taking over. This is what much lighter up top. I'm just going to go all the way around him. So again, not adding too much. So it kind of looks like snow, but it's going to work out really in the end for sure. Just some light stuff in the foreground. We got that light rock here. And we're just going to do that all the way around where we see light. And as it goes back in space, it gets a little bit grayer, a little greener. Sponges are great for a lot of things. Ocean waves, ferns, hedges, trees. So you got a lot of stuff in there, and you've got a lot of base. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of let that rest while we start to work on the penguin, and then we're going to do some additional stuff here with the grasses. So with the grasses, actually, let's work on the penguin. Because that's like the best part, right? Working on the penguin. So with the penguin, now I'm going to start to take, and I'm going to kind of balance them out with what's in the environment. I'm realizing real quick now too, I gotta do one quick thing with my white. So it kind of comes up. It's okay if it overlaps into the penguin for now. Oops, that was a little too light. Okay, la la la. Here we go. Okay, penguin. So I'm going to start with, here's my palette again. So I'm going to start with my phthalo blue. He's really dark, so I'm going to do my phthalo blue first and kind of give my base coat. Actually, sorry, phthalo blue and black. We're going to start with phthalo blue and black and do like the darkest parts of him first. So I'm just going to draw him in. And right now we're not worried about too much the surface of the texture of the feathers. We're just really just literally blocking them in with some darker colors. And then just kind of showing in what direction the surface is. So like his wing in the front comes down like that. The other side. And it's got some color here. And because I know these are feathers, what I really want to do is I kind of want to angle my brush to kind of start showing some texture that way, because I know paint is going to build up on the canvas. So I kind of want to also go in the direction of the feathers while still kind of placing in this bird. Still black and phthalo together. I'm just using like an up and down scratchy. And then it's got some dark area under here.
Yikes.
And then now we've got the phthalo that's more phthalo and just a little bit of black. So I just put my brush in more phthalo. And I'm going to start to look at his little face here. I know where the symmetry line is. And that's going to get lighter as we go up. Essentially. We're just plugging in that dark for now. It's starting to emerge. And because I've got that phthalo on my brush already, I'm going to start to look at some of these areas around the hole that also kind of reflect that dark color. And this time I'm just going to kind of sweep it in. I'm giving it a little bit of an edge so that some of those little areas kind of disappear, to give this area a little bit more form. So all this stuff that we added, now we're going to start to give it a little more form. Again, I'm just putting in some dark shadows. But while you have it on your brush, may as well use it. These feathers come a little bit more white. Okay, so we know that. Okay.
Right.
Okay, we have a half hour to pull this off. Time goes so fast. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to just tighten up the background while letting that penguin rest, because he's going to be like, that's going to be the very last part that we finish. But we have to make things look a little bit more cohesive in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to do some really thin, really start to work in the straw and start to add a little bit of highlights there too. So I've got this color is kind of a good color, but I want to add a little bit more green. So I'm going to use the phthalo blue and yellow. And I've got this green right there. And we're going to do some of these little grasses here. So I'm just going to take and actually I need to make it a little lighter so you can see. And we're just going to kind of, if you had a like a bamboo stick, this would work well, or the back of your paintbrush. I can show you what that looks like. You can just kind of scratch that in, but I'm just going to flick it. I'll give you an indication that there's some stuff going on back there. And I'm going to go back in with a lighter color too, but I want to kind of have that ground color to show that it's green, that there's some green stuff happening. And there's green stuff happening here too. So I'm just going to dot that in. And there's some green it's coming out here a little bit. So try to find those green punches. So there's one that's here too. That kind of comes up a little bit. It's a little bit near the, and then we've got some green that's down here in the lower right hand side. And that's going to help us to kind of carry our eye around that nice warm color. All right, and as I go, I also am looking for what's going on around this. So I'm going to go back in with a little bit of black. And again, kind of like pepper in some black shapes. Just to kind of tighten up those areas a little bit more. And again, reflecting that this is a horizontal landscape. And this guy needs to be cleaned up. So that dark black is going to come in handy here. So then we can kind of clean up some of these grasses. And show a defined space here. So that's starting to come together. And then even here, there's some darker areas. We can just kind of put those under. And add some areas where the rocks might be. Some rocks here that are dark. Put some shadows here. Just kind of pick up on some rocks that are there in the background. I kind of fudge that area a little bit, so I'm going to just kind of darken it in. Might have to go, we're going to go in with one more really light layer of that brown. It's going to be sort of our last bit. Okay, I'm starting to see in this area here to the right of the penguin. Let's put that right in the green, that wasn't right. Okay, I have some phthalo blue and I'm going to add a little bit of white.
Yeah, white.
And when I do that, I'm going to start to work in some of these feathers too. So you've got some rocks back here behind him that are a little bit blue.
Yeah,
And then you see how that kind of makes that pop. So now what we want to do with that is we kind of want to bring that into some of these other areas. So here we've got that phthalo blue and white is kind of coming down where that little penguin hole is. See what is happening here. Maybe a little too much there. Second. Kind of like what I just did. That guy needs to stay dark. And let's just go over it with some black. So back here will help to tighten up some of those rocks there. Okay, so I like the color of this blue that's coming in, and that's going to help us to make the penguin kind of sit in the space. So I've got my messy palette, and now what I want to do is I've got that phthalo blue, and I've got that little bit of white, and now I want to paint in my penguin. So we already have the dark colors really established there, but now what we want to do is we kind of want to come in really short strokes. And kind of help define our penguin a little bit more. Make sure you're leaving some of the black areas. Again, little short strokes in the direction of the penguin's feathers. So he's starting to come together. Remember, we're doing light base coats one at a time. So we're finding where those little colors are, because the white on top of it is going to start to pull these back. But we really want to show the saturation of the penguin. So we're a little bit intense with this color. But once you add the white, it's going to really dull him down, and it's going to really make him pop forward. This beak's kind of tricky. But right now, just kind of blocking that color. Okay. So now we're going to add the white, and the white's going to be the where we have to be really super careful. So here we've all been very loose, right? But now we got to be really careful with our placement of our whites. So I'm going to mix up a white that's has a little bit of a tint with the phthalo blue. And for this one, you want to have a brush that that maybe it's a little hard. Maybe it's one of those that had sat with the acrylic for a little while, but one that has maybe even some harder bristles, because you want sort of the texture to show through. So I continue to use my smaller brush, but I'm going to kind of almost turn it into a dry brush. And when I do that, I just wipe the paint on my palette until I'm not really I can see I don't know if you can see that, but almost so that it's not fully loaded. But you can kind of start to see the hairs of the bristles. You can start to see the bristles, because that's kind of how we're going to scratch this in. So I'm going to start with where his beak is. I'm just going to pull that in. So make a mark and pull it down. It comes down here. And we're just going to leave some of the blue behind, because that's the important part. And then with his eyes are a little bit more white, but we'll brighten it too. But he's got, I really like that. And then his feather line looks like this. Be really careful. So you can see I'm not using the wholly white, because I want to do one more thing on top, because like I said, the more layers, the more it makes him look fluffy. So little strokes. How are we doing on time? Oh my God, 19 minutes. Oh. We're doing it, we're doing it. Okay. And then as we go down, we've got, like I said, some little more of that blue color. So I wanna, and I'm just gonna, with his feathers, you're just kind of going up like this, little strokes. And then when you get to your brighter white, a little bit brighter white, and that's coming down here. Okay, it's kind of like, think about if you were to pet this penguin, what do you feel? What kind of texture would he have? His belly's a little bit more blue and he's back up in white. Should get that guy right. And he's a little lighter up here. So we've got his feathers kind of sear into that middle band there of color. And then I'm going to do more of a pure white. So I'm adding a little bit more white into this band here. Again, moving my brush down. And I'm seeing where there's some other areas of real white. White, white, white. And this white comes over here. So we're starting to plug him in. And then now that I feel pretty confident about his face, I'm going to kind of put in the rest of this white. He's got a little bit of that right there. So. Add a bit in there. So yeah, you see how that blue kind of like disappears, but it's still really good. We're gonna have to bring that black up a little bit more. But here we've got some, let's figure out his face. And comes down. I'm doing that black part of his eye last. And short little strokes. And he's got this band of underneath his beak. We've got some highlights there. So if you have a liner brush or a small, teeny, tiny brush, you can also add to your, oops, there we go. You can also add to your feathers in this darker area where there's a little bit of extra, a little extra white. And you can just kind of like, again, follow the feathers, really small marks. There. He's got some like little details here. And at this point, you want your brush to be kind of slick. So if you have to add water, a little bit of water. But here you want to build up. Oh, here, let me fix this. I gotta fix this part real quick. My penguin he's got that dark area there. That he needs to have back. So put that back here. And then it gets a little lighter as we go up. So I'm just mixing a light phthalo blue and then some white. Mix with that. And you can put some of that black back in too. All I'm doing is kind of like trickling that in because you can kind of see there's some feather action there. It kind of goes down. And I want to show these in amongst these rocks here. So we're going to do a very quick bit there too. And it's got a beak. This beak is a pretty much black beak. Yeah. So again, just little short strokes. Oops. We're doing okay, 8 minutes. Oh my goodness. How do we maximize our time? Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the eyes in. Let's go ahead and put the black eyes in. Again, I'm just gonna use a small liner brush because they're just they're little tiny crescents, so I don't want to mess that up. Make sure your brush is well loaded. My band is a little wider. There's some white area around here. So we can add some of that rock stuff that's happening. And we've got some stuff that's happening here. So just kind of putting in a little bit of lines here. And then as we got that liner brush, just pop in a couple little extra. Just kind of show that there's stuff happening back there. And this little sprout. Just gives a little bit more white there too. Okay. I'm going to do this a little cross-eyed, but I want him to really have some white around his eyes. So I'm just going to clean that up a little. see. Always make sure you wipe your wipe your brush with a paper towel before you keep going back in. Oops. No, I didn't want that to happen. Still too white. There we go. Yeah, with a painting like this is 2 hours is really short amount of time. So I hope you guys are done with me today. I hope that you keep noodling around with it.
No, Jen, I just want to say this is a great painting.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, I mean, just that little penguin.
Yeah, isn't he cute?
Yeah, yeah. At first I didn't know what he was, but
Uh-huh.
I can look. Yeah, it was really a good painting.
Oh, thanks.
Fun to do.